How are you doing, my dear friend Alex?
I'm doing fantastic. I love this intro feature. I get to listen to our beautiful music live and dance to it in the office. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I have lots to talk about jobs, technology, Bitcoin, and lots of other things. So lots to catch up on.
That's fantastic. We can start with you. I would like to talk about the State of the Union, which was on yesterday at some point. I know you didn't watch it, but I found it to be informative in many ways, in ways it typically isn't. But
Well,
we can
that's
do that.
great. I would love to hear why it led to a Bitcoin price pump, which happened exactly during the State of the Union. But we can talk about this as the second theme. I just wanted to say there was this big piece that blew up over the weekend that you sent to me and a bunch of other people too mentioned about like technology doomerism, and it was basically talking about how all the white collar jobs will be displaced, and that's most of our tax revenue, and so everything will collapse and people won't be able to pay their mortgages, and like it went on and on and on. And I have two main criticisms of this piece. So first of all is what we spoke about last week, which is the trend of the Nasdaq has been very, very steady, and we're not like overbought. So like I wouldn't see what's so different about this narrative that wasn't here in 2020, 2018, 2016, 20. Like this trend goes back so many, many years. And so like that's observation number one, which is like, okay, it's nice that you have this like future projection, Mr. Doomer, but like I don't see any reason for the stock market to not reflect it. And we can chat a lot about like how will it basically go into the price of stocks, who will get the benefit from the increased productivity and all of that. But bottom line, I just want to say the trend lines usually don't break, especially when it's a trend line about an index and about something that there's actual value created, right? Like ChatGPT can do things now that we could not do 5 years ago. So it's not some kind of like hype, it's actual technology that allows us to do things better. So I think the onus is on the doomers to tell us why this time it's different. So that's like point number one. And point number two is that I just wanted to take a step back for all of our listeners here and think about like what is an economy? Okay, like what is, when we say the economy, the global economy or the US economy, what is that? It's basically we're taking raw energy, mixing it with capital products like land, labor, raw materials, right? And we're mixing it together and creating things that we want to consume and produce, right? And this will produce the things that we want to consume. So then, if the premise of this doomer piece is that productivity will increase, which means with the same inputs of energy, with the same inputs of raw materials, we'll be able to do more. How could that lead to a collapse of the economy? Like, yeah, you can cherry pick things like, okay, people won't be able to pay their mortgages. Guess what? Executive order. The government pays your mortgage from now on, and the government gets the equity in your house as long as they pay your mortgage. Problem solved, right? That's pretty much what they did in 2008. And I remember this because like I took a course in 2011, 12 on money markets and the Fed, and they literally, we spent many classes talking about how they bought the mortgage-backed securities, how they put it on the Fed balance sheet, and how they had this plan of unloading it from the Fed balance sheet. And at the end, they didn't unload it from the Fed balance sheet. But basically, what is the Federal Reserve, a bank, purchasing people's mortgages? That's exactly the government owns part of your house. It's exactly the same thing. Right now, they didn't call it that. They said, like, no, if you keep paying your mortgage, you get to keep your house. But if you stop paying the mortgage, guess what? The government now owns it. It's not like it doesn't go to the market, right? They were afraid that everybody will stop paying their mortgage, everybody will dump homes on the market, the prices will keep collapsing. That's what they were afraid of. So the government said, no worries, we're going to move all these houses on our balance sheet. So you can do this with unemployment benefits. You can do it with mortgage payments. You can do it with car payments. You can say, look, we're taking your car away, but we're giving you robo-taxi credits instead. Like there's so many things you can do. So those are my 2 points. Point A, I don't think the trend will break. And it's the onus is on the doomers to tell me why this time is different. Point number 2, if we increase productivity, it should result in a better economy. It cannot result in a worse economy. Now that's very different from the pandemic, where it's like people are sick, people don't work. That actually, harms the economy. But like saying that extra productivity will harm the economy, I just don't see it from first
Wait,
hand.
wait, sorry. So I want to respond, but why? You said something interesting. People are sick, people don't work. Why does that harm the economy?
Well, because it's like people are sick and they don't work. They don't work because there's a software that does their work instead of them. They don't work because they have high fever. It's completely different. In one scenario, the work gets done, just not by people. In the other scenario, the work doesn't get done, which means products don't get produced.
So okay, let's let me respond to this because while I agree in the long run, I disagree in the short run. I do think there's a lot of credence to be said, and I've always been under the umbrella that we're going to lose a ton of jobs, and we may reorient the economy in the longer run, but in the short to medium run, call it 5 to 10 years. I think it's going to be very painful. We're going to lose a ton of jobs, and while the government should theoretically, you know, step up and give what you're talking about is a form of UBI one way or another. That UBI, it's all kind of UBI, right? The UBI can be a check to a person, it can be a job that the government hires for, and it's a bit a non-productive job, but they're just keeping people occupied. Or I like the way you said mortgages. The central bank buying mortgages, a way of buying and owning part of your house. You can do the same in cars. Kind of another way of UBI, just under a different shell. I think these things could and will happen, but they're going to happen slower than people
Mhm.
need it. I think that it's not going to be in sync with AI disruption, specifically because of the polarity we have now and polarization we have in the country and in Congress. I just don't believe that the government will be able to act quickly enough and decisively enough, and frankly, um, what's the right term for it? Prescriptively enough, right? In order to sustain the disruption. They will do it in the long run. Of course, they will do it, and of course, they will support the people. I just don't think it's going to happen in the short run, or there'll be temporary measures, or there'll be executive orders. But these
What's the
executive,
problem with temporary measures and
well,
executive orders?
because they're gonna be fighting over legislation. Ultimately, you need to codify this in legislation. You have to, because we don't think this is a temporary effect.
So you're saying, let me just, because this is an interesting point, and this is like Arthur Hayes' point too. He basically says until things get bad enough, like until the stock market drops by enough,
Yeah.
Congress will not, especially, with the president versus Congress, it's like they won't necessarily do what needs to be done. And so is your fear that the stock market doesn't drop? Is your fear that the stock market drops and even so they don't act?
No, no. So
Like, what's the
actually,
scenario you're afraid of?
I didn't know that was his point, but I'm glad
That was
we're the
exactly
same
his
point.
point. His point is like things will break big time,
Yeah,
people will stop paying their loans, everything will collapse by a lot, and then they will print a bunch of
yeah.
money to save the
I
system.
think I think that's going to happen. But look, when the collapse happens, when there are these big deleveraging events, it takes time to recover, even mentally, right? Because you've
Hmm.
been in the market. Let's say the market crashes by 30 or 40%. First
Hmm.
of all, it's going to wipe out a lot of leverage. Second of all,
Hmm.
it's going to create a lot of margin calls. Now, you might think it's one and the same. What I guess I mean by that is there's leverage in the system. People are buying on leverage. They get margin called, and maybe that's okay because it's an investment or second, third investment. I think people get life margin called, kind of the same way 2008 happened. I remember living through 2008 here in the States, and it was every single day emergency meeting here, emergency meeting there, working into the night, press conference first thing in the morning. We need to unfreeze the markets. I mean, this was all hands on deck.
Hmm.
It was Bush, then Obama, then it was I forgot the Goldman guy. I forgot his name. I can imagine it.
Geithner?
No,
Is it
before
Geithner?
Geithner. No, it was before Geithner. There was a kind of bald guy. He
Yeah,
was,
I remember that guy. He
yeah.
made so much money. There's like a thing where he made so much money because he's exempt of capital gains taxes as a treasury secretary, and so yeah, there was a thing where he made
That's
so
amazing.
much money. But
Amazing.
anyway, I know Paulson, Hank Paulson,
Paulson, Hank Paulson. That's right. That's good memory. So Paulson orchestrated a whole TARP. It was called TARP, which is Treasury Asset
repurchase
Repurchase
program.
Program. Yeah,
Yeah.
and this is kind of saved the banks way back when. and insurance companies. So I think something like this needs to happen, and it's a very very painful moment. And look, out of
Mm.
2008, it took about 2010, 2011 for us to fully come out and recover. It's a 3-year recovery. Now people
Well,
have to
it's a
live day
3 year
to day.
recovery if you look at the absolute top,
Well, sure, but
top to top. But my
from where we
point,
are now, so from where
well,
we are
yeah,
now,
but you're assuming that now is the top. And that's
from
what I'm
where the
saying.
top
I'm
is.
saying I'm not necessarily buying I'm not buying the scenario where like this is a 2008 type situation. I'm not. Just because like again,
I
if you
think it's
look at
going to be.
the
I think it's
you
going
think
to
it's
be.
going to.
Yeah,
Okay.
because look, let's look at what Claude is doing. Now there are multiple things online. Let's take IBM and Cobalt, or let's take cybersecurity. Let's take cybersecurity. Okay, you have a bunch of these CrowdStrike and so on cybersecurity firms. Plus, I want to talk to you about duration. By the way, remind me to talk to you a little bit about duration. But just let's look at this on a micro level. So
Hmm.
here comes Claude, and it can detect vulnerabilities and write codes to patch it better than cybersecurity firms. In fact,
Hmm.
there was this. I remember seeing a tweet. I think this has happened recently, the last few weeks. A hacker got into Claude, or basically took off the guardrails. It hacked the Mexican government. It stole all this data and it wrote patches. I mean, it could do it on a nation state level. Now you could say Mexico isn't the top nation in the world, fine, but Mexico also isn't like Nicaragua. You know what I mean? Mexico is
Yep.
pretty legit. So call it Mexico is this first or second. There's like that ultra. There's a superpower, U.S. Then call it whatever, UK, France, China, or maybe U.S. China, and then Europe, then Mexico's in that maybe second tier, right, of countries or third
Hmm.
tier, whatever. But it's up there. If it can hack the Mexican government, it can surely hack a lot of people in the world. This is today. So if you're CrowdStrike, and not only can it hack it, it can create right patches and fix itself. Why does CrowdStrike exist? Maybe to translate it, right? So how many consultants do you actually need to do? You don't need to do pen testing anymore. You can just literally rely on AI to do it for you, especially with software. And by the way, why is it so good in software? Because the software engineers were designing it for themselves in the beginning. That's the first use case. In a
Hmm.
year or two, I could see it happening. The same thing in medicine. The same thing, like in medicine now, I take images and I don't call my mom or a sister who are doctors. I put out to ChatGPT or Grok and I say, "Hey, track me.
Yeah.
What is this? What?" And it diagnoses it fantastically well. So it's just a matter of time. And when this happens, you'll see massive drops in unemployment within a certain. It'll be slowly, but then suddenly. And when those people get reemployed, call it a year from that point, okay? Or let's call it a year, 6, 9 months, a year. Even if the government acts right away, it'll take some time. You got to disperse the payments. People have to get used to the shock. You have to calm down. You have to remove the risk in your brain. People, this is, we can talk about duration, and there's a duration premium on US stocks, by the way, which is why Bitcoin is falling, which is why software is falling. Everyone's confused. I sent
Hmm.
you an article. It's a great piece by what's his name, Andrea Larson Stenso, or maybe I'm mispronouncing his name. He writes for Old Paul. He's a good economist, and I like some of his stuff. Some of his stuff is a little simplistic, but it was pretty good. Anyway, Andreas Steno Larson. There we go. Andreas Steno Larson. When there is confusion, it will take time for this thing to fall out, hit pretty big, people be out of jobs. And look, man, people live day to day. People live year to year. Even if it takes a year, it takes a year and a half. And that seems to be pretty fast in Congress, right? Um, it will take some time for people to recalibrate. And even if it takes quickly, people lose jobs. It'll take Congress a little bit to recognize it. Call it half a year. And not even COVID, which is obviously coming. Like, COVID was coming. Okay, let's just look at this. We see COVID is sudden, right? COVID March it happened. They came out with stimulus what March April, right? Later on in April, it seems like a month, but that's not true. It's COVID-19. They knew about COVID in November 2019, in October 2019. So it took 6 months just from the first people in Asia starting to get sick for them to realize what was happening. So it's going to be layoff, 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 10% unemployment. Oh, we got to do something. And then some people will never come back. Just like now from COVID, people are never coming back to the workplace. So we're going to have, forget productivity, displacement of workers, okay? A displacement of human
Yeah.
lives.
I completely agree that there will be displacement of human lives, but I just don't think, like, just think of your example. The CrowdStrike work keeps being performed just by someone else, right? I heard a really good metaphor, and I want to re-up it. So, are you familiar with how the United Arab Emirates operate in Saudi Arabia? They
Tell me
basically
more.
have a small percentage of the population, like maybe 20% or even 10%, I don't remember the exact number, that are citizens, okay? And then everybody else is either a worker that they bring with a special work visa, and they cannot stay. They can just like work, and once their contract is done, they leave. Or expats that move to these places because of zero capital gains tax and zero taxes at all. And then they get to stay, but you need money to do that. So someone in a podcast said, imagine that each AI agent is an immigrant that can enter your country without your control. That's a good mental model, right? About thinking of the disruption that it'll create. So, like, you have a bunch of these immigrants that do the CrowdStrike jobs. You have a bunch of these immigrants that do the medicine jobs. You have a bunch of these immigrants that do the whatever, the lawyer, accountant, consultant jobs, right? So, on the first order, it sounds terrible, right? It's like, oh no, these guys are not going to be able to be consultants anymore, or they're not going to be able to be doctors anymore. They're left by the wayside. But guess what? The people who are citizens of Saudi Arabia and Dubai, they live really well without working because there's other immigrants doing the work for them and they have natural resources. So with that mental model, look, I'm not saying there's not going to be displacement, right? Probably the work that you and I did at BCG 2012, I could totally see it going away, and it just becomes like the partner. I saw somewhere on Twitter, it's like private equity firms say we don't need associates anymore, because then it's just like a relationship. You're the partner, you're like, you have the relationship, and then you have the AI doing all the financial engineering for you. But why is that a bad world? So, like, you're just
No, but
assuming
let's take it on
that
a micro
everything will
level.
collapse at once. But I'm saying it's not going to collapse at once. In 2008, the problem is that they overbuilt houses. In 2000, the problem is that they overbuilt fiber. And then now we
We've
spoke about
overbuilt
this,
human labor capital. We've overbuilt
but
human
that's not
capital.
overbuilding. That's what I'm saying. That's exactly my point. You distilled this point. Capital is something that you can spend in a way that's not profitable, right? So, like, you built all this fiber optics, nobody's using it,
Yeah.
right? You built all these houses, nobody's living there. You have too much square
You
footage.
don't think you can have labor? You don't think you can have more than enough labor
Because
that's not
labor is a
profitable?
different capital. Labor is a different capital entity. You have labor and you have capital. Those two things are
Okay,
not the
okay. So
same,
can, let
right?
me let me let
So
me
I'm
can I
just
ask you to explain
imagining, what
something?
if instead of people retiring at 65, right, what you can do is, like, you can start lowering the retirement age. You can
Sure.
start saying, like, okay, now Social Security kicks in even if you're 50 and you don't have a job, you
Okay,
start getting
fine,
Social
fine.
Security.
But then
Stuff like that.
so
As long
fine.
as the economy, I'll just say one more
Yeah.
sentence. As long as the economy keeps churning out the same output, right? That's what we need. That's what we didn't have in 2000. It didn't churn out the same output. They dumped a bunch of money on fiber optics and there was no output. They built a bunch of houses. There was nobody living there and paying the mortgages. So
Okay,
here,
okay.
my condition is that the same output keeps happening.
Yeah, fine. We trained a whole bunch of computer scientists, and then now they're completely useless. Now what do you do with
But
them?
again, that's human capital.
No, I get it, but I don't understand why it's so necessarily so different. That human capital, well, there is a difference in terms of you're saying, hey, there has to be production. So if the human capital comes out, the machine is obsolete, a new machine goes in, and that company with a new machine, AI versus human capital, can make more of the same goods, if not equal, and so on. I totally get that argument. Now, in that situation, right? In that situation, who gets the value? The companies do. So how do you, as mere human, now this is going to be on a major scale where they're going to be able to accrue a ton of value, right? So, but just think about it like this. I think at some point the K-shaped recovery breaks, or we go into a civil war because the argument that you're making has one implicit assumption. This factory that makes X product has a better machine, AI versus human. We got rid of the old punch card machine, and now we have an IBM computer. We can produce more. The human goes to the side for a second, okay? there's no longer getting paid for in the real world, in a corporate world. That would be a company, and that company would go out of business. Okay, and those people will have to be reemployed somewhere else.
Not
And
necessarily. I didn't say
fine,
that.
fine, not necessarily.
They could
It's even
retire.
more fine. They can't retire if they're workers for
No,
a
they can
punch card machine.
retire if the government keeps paying them their salary even though they're not working.
Okay, fine. So let's take this. This is, but let's go through the scenario. We're gonna end up kind of in your scenario, but again, all I'm arguing for is that we're gonna see a long period of pain. Excuse me, I had to sneeze. A period of call 1 to 2, 3 years of pain before this
Mm-hmm.
catches up. And maybe this is good that we're walking through this for our listeners. Maybe for me, it helps walk through on the micro level. You have an AI agent. The person is fired. Okay, the person is going home. The company is still producing whatever it produces. Now let's assume it's just this one company and demand stays the same.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, who actually benefits from this? From the company getting more? The shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, not the workers, not the employees, the
Yep.
shareholders, which creates a more and a bigger K-shaped recovery. And a K-shaped recovery is the people that hold assets win, especially stocks and so on. The people who don't hold assets lose. The post-COVID, the people who got richer and felt better were people at the top versus people at the bottom. Now, a second point to this is the spending. First of all, the people who own stocks, it's like 90% of it is owned by the 10% of the country. Second of all, the top 10% are responsible for 50% of the spending. They're the ones keeping the economy going. Due to this, we're going to concentrate that level even more. There'll be an even deeper level of have, and have nots, and the people who have own assets. So, one, you need to hold assets, people. That's the only way out of this situation is to hold assets. Now, this is going to happen across many companies. So you have many people that are unemployed. Now, who is the company selling to? Implicitly, the companies have to sell. If the consumer becomes more concentrated, either the top get uber wealthy and the bottom don't, and or the government has to go in and buy this stuff, even if they don't necessarily want to. This is essentially your way of saying the government is going to pay people UBI. They're going to be buying stuff even cheaper or more of it, but they're going to step in and be a much bigger player in the global economy. That takes time. That takes 2 or 3 years to get through. So in the meantime, people are going to be out of a job. They can't go get anything. They're not going to have weekly or monthly payouts. So what are they going to buy? And while the government steps in to buy, these companies that are overproducing are going to create a drop in prices. Prices, not only because of technological deflation, but because like tariffs, right? Tariffs will cause inflation. Why? Because Trump crushed demand. I think AI is going to crush demand as well. Now, at some point, it will catch up and the equilibrium will happen. And I completely agree with you. If the prices get cheap enough, if things are free, people will go get it and use it, even if you can't afford it. And this goes to our thesis together that in the long run, technology improves the floor, but creates a bigger dispersion of inequality between the haves and have-nots. I agree with you on all of this. This has been the same thesis. But until this happens, it's going to be extremely, extremely painful.
Okay, so that's where we disagree. We disagree about does it have to be painful or is there a way to make this not painful? Would you say that's our core disagreement?
Probably, yeah.
So yeah, so
And
I
for how
can think
long?
of ways to make it not painful. For example, in your example of the factory, you forgot that there's the factory, right? There's the workers. Let's say that let's say that the world is just one factory producing food, and then the workers of that factory that also buy the food, and then there's also the government. Okay, and that's our entire universe. So now suddenly robots come and do the job of half of the people. So half of the people don't have a job anymore, right?
Mhm.
But as long as the same amount of food gets produced by the factory, what the government can do is tax the factory either by directly taxing it or by printing money, which is like another way of taxing it, and paying the people that used to work in the factory the same salary that they used to get. Now, the thing is, why can it be the same salary? Because there's also robots in there. Because I think that you can pay the same salary or slightly less, maybe 10% less or 20% less, and then people will actually find another job at some point, right? So they're not going to just sit at home
Hold on a
and
second.
earn like
This is where
90%. Let me just
yeah.
finish the argument. So like if you assume that a robot can replace the person for, let's say, half of the cost of the person, so you just need to bridge that gap while you still pay the full 90% salary to the person, but you still have to pay for the robot, right? And so that's the painful period in your point where you as a government are spending more, right? But you're just assuming that the people will stay stagnant in that situation, and in that case I agree with you, it's going to be very painful because you have to keep paying the people that had the jobs, but you also had to pay for the robots that replaced them, and that can be very painful. But I'm saying, first of all, it doesn't happen all at once in all the economy. For example, someone said in medicine it's very clear, you'll have regulation that says like you cannot get a medication unless it's prescribed by a human. Even if ChatGPT can diagnose you, they cannot prescribe you the medication. So you can pass regulation that kind of slows it a little bit, and then I think that those people will find other things to do, right? Like your argument and the argument of everybody that's a doomer basically freezes everything in time, and they say like, oh, these people used to have a job and now they don't have a job, and it's terrible. But no, like people evolve. People, maybe they'll want to start doing other things. Maybe we'll have other things to do with our time that we didn't even imagine. For example, women used to not work, and then suddenly they invented washing machines and things that allowed women to work, and so then suddenly GDP increased because of that, right? But like what happens if suddenly now we go back to like women not working? If half of the population suddenly doesn't work, or women, men, doesn't matter, one of the if single income households, right, become the norm, that absorbs a huge amount of workers. Like think of how many dual income households you have. So just there, you can have like no social disruption, not people like idling. I've heard stuff. Yeah, you sit idle at home, you go do a revolution, you go do January 7th or 6th or whatever it was. It's like, no, because like you can maybe take care of the kids, right? Instead of somebody else taking care of them. And then you're asking, oh, what will the other person that used to take care of the kids do? Okay, maybe they'll do something else that we currently don't. So I'm just thinking you can't freeze everything in time and assume that the only thing that happens is robots come in and take your jobs. I don't think that's like
So
a deep enough level of
here's my
analysis.
biggest argument. I think everything you say makes sense on an academic level, but it's not reality. And in reality, again, there's no doomerism here in terms of it'll take our jobs and we're all screwed. I think it will take all of our jobs and we're screwed until we figure things out. But we have plenty of evidence. Plenty. COVID is one where people have left the workforce and have stayed at home. We have plenty of evidence of people sitting on welfare in the United States and in Europe. In France, you get paid more to be retired
Mm-hmm.
than you do than if you're working on average. That's insane, right?
Yeah.
So why would people go back to work when it's literally fine to sit at home and not do anything? Once people get on welfare, it's very hard to get back, okay, and to get into becoming more productive. It just is. It doesn't. We have many examples of this. It doesn't work.
I talk about this in my book. I completely agree with you. And I think that many people will be kind of drugged video game
Yeah.
zombies. But that doesn't mean that the stock market will collapse.
No, but okay.
That's my argument. My argument was just around, can we do this transition without huge pain? Or do we have to first experience pain in the stock market and then print the
The
money and
stock
then do the
market has
transition?
to collapse. It has to collapse for the government to step in. Otherwise, they don't feel it. Otherwise, it doesn't. It doesn't like this thing has to be, the alarm has to ring, or else people don't act.
So, for example, I sent you an image that we can put up here about basically the jobs peaking in 2024, end of 2024, right? And since 2025, the jobs are going down. The total jobs are going down, but the GDP keeps growing. So, like, why do you think that's a problem? Why do you think that cannot continue?
I don't know,
GDP
because
keeps
it's a
growing and
small blip in
jobs.
time. You're showing a small blip in time. In the
No, but
image you
I'm saying,
sent,
why
it's
can
very
this trend
correlated.
continue? I showed you that the trend broke in 2025, early 2025, right? And since then, it's been broken. So jobs are going down, GDP is going up. My question is, why can't this continue?
I'll try to pull up the chart that you sent. Jobs are going down, GDP. You had the same thing according to your chart. You had the same thing in what, 2008. This is the same thing that happened during the 2008 financial crisis. Jobs are going down, and GDP is actually going back up. Like we've
Yeah.
had this before. The government has to step in and print a ton of
Well,
money.
I'll just say that the difference here is that in 2008 the drop was pretty big, and then you did see a drop in GDP.
I mean, the GDP is flat if we're actually looking at it. GDP is fairly
No,
flat.
it's like there is a drop, and there was a drop in COVID. But apart from COVID in 2008, in the data set from 2000 till today, GDP is constantly going up. So my question is, why isn't this time different than 2008? And you see the jobs keep declining, but the GDP keeps going up.
I think jobs declining is a year's worth of data, and starting from this thing looks like 2023 or 2024, it's been declining. I don't know. I think it could be a short blip of inconsistency. That I can't draw anything from this chart. I mean,
Yeah.
it actually looks
Okay.
like it's consistent.
I
So
mean, we'll see. We'll see. It's fine to disagree. Did you want to talk about duration
yeah,
or?
duration is the same article that came out about people being confused. I don't think any one of us know. And look, as much as we are, we have a podcast and we talk about this, and we tend to think that we maybe have a unique perspective on things. So does Wall Street, right? What's actually evident is that no one really knows and no one understands. Um, all of these, many analysts are scratching their heads and trying to figure out the exact same thing that we're figuring out. Maybe we are a little bit closer to tech because we came out of tech and we know the industry pretty well. But this is why software stocks have been getting nuked for many different reasons. But one of the reasons is Wall Street is nervous about what AI is going to do with software stocks. Bitcoin is being nuked. In addition to that, if you think about duration risk of any sovereign being able to, hey, or any bond, give me money and I'll pay you back. Well, you might be out of business in 5 or 6 years. So there's definitely duration risk premium that kills growth, by the way, right?
Can
So
you just define that for our audience? Duration risk.
yeah, so let's take bonds, and you can let's say you lend the government money for 3 months, and in 3 months, let's say a year, and in a year you get back 4%. That's your annual rate on bonds. Now, if you lend the government money for 3 years, you presumably would need to get paid more because things can happen, and you don't know what's going to happen. So the premium of the longer you go out, the higher you need to be compensated for that. Is that it's duration, like the longer out the instrument goes, especially non kind of non-productive capital, so bonds and so on, the capital that doesn't make money off of operations.
Hmm.
Um, that duration risk has been increasing. So the bond market demands more yield, more percentage for money that's being allocated to that, and that's to those debt instruments, so to the duration instruments. Same thing for big kind of growth stocks, software stocks. Hey, I'm gonna invest money in me now, and in 10 years, I'm gonna capture all this market. Well, maybe in 10 years the market isn't even there because AI has completely disrupted it.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of premium on the now. In addition to that, if we there's a bunch of forces compounding right now. In addition to that, if we're talking about deflation, which is what technology drives, the dollar tomorrow is going to be worth more than the dollar today. It really freezes the economy because you don't want to spend your dollars now. You're holding on to them because they're going to be worth more, and
But
you're
that's
willing to
easy.
spend.
That's easy because you can just devalue the dollar. So
You
like,
have to devalue
yeah,
the bond.
yeah, but that's not a problem. So like, I that's the other thing I don't get. Like people who say deflation risk. No, there's no risk there if the government can fully control it.
No, but I think deflation risk means, hey, this thing is coming. It doesn't like. I think the risk is more colloquial in this case, but there's always a risk. There's always a risk, like upside risk. It's going to go up. It's not a risk. It's good because the number go up, right? So I think in here, it's more colloquially used as a nomenclature for whatever, for a market phenomenon. However, that said, again, it could happen, and my whole argument is that the government, especially a polarized government, doesn't act on a whim and on a dime. And if we get a
Yeah.
split Congress in the presidency, whichever way, they're going to sit, they're going to stall. Look at, for example, stable coins, right? everyone agrees, even the financial industry, stablecoin
No, the
rails.
financial industry doesn't agree. The
No, hold
financial
on a
industry
second.
doesn't want to stable
No,
coins
that's not
to
true.
make
That's not
yield.
true. Everyone agrees that stablecoins is a network, is a more efficient way of moving money around the world. Everyone agrees with that. What they don't agree on is who gets healed. Fine, but outside of that,
Okay.
just bringing the Clarity Act, the Genius Act forward took like 3 or 4 years. Even though we
Yeah.
all saw that this is clearly a better way. It got for banks to get on board, this to get on board, that to get on board.
Okay,
It all
gotcha. So
takes
you're
time.
basically saying, just to not belabor the point, you're saying things will happen fast, the government will react slowly, and in that gap, the market will collapse and there'll be a
Yes,
problem. Gotcha. Okay,
yes,
it's definitely a thing to consider, and that's why people who listen to us should definitely have enough reserves so they don't have to sell in the bottom, right on the bottom. Like the recent Bitcoin price action shows really well how even if everything goes right in terms of macro, right, something can happen and just
yeah,
completely destroy the valuation. So I'm not saying that you're not right. All I'm saying is that I'm a little bit more long term focused, and I think that the government will act more quickly than you think, because even if there's no big collapse, I think it will be very clear. People will lose jobs in a certain state, and then the state will come to the federal government and say like, "Hey, we're going bankrupt. We need you to absorb our debts," like Illinois with their pensions and stuff. And then the federal government will say, "Okay, like we'll print a bunch of money and give it to you." And I think that's how it'll happen. It's not going to necessarily be a big problem that requires. And also, like, look, I saw a documentary about 2008. They actually acted really fast when things got bad enough. Like there was a time where they literally on a Sunday they went into the Oval Office and told the president, like, if we don't do this now, the ATMs will not work like on Monday. And then they just got everybody to approve it like overnight. So I think, again, if things get bad enough, they'll act quickly. If things don't get bad enough, then we're fine. And you're just talking about an edge case where things get bad enough but not bad enough for them to act really quickly. Yeah, it could happen.
yeah,
Definitely could happen.
exactly. So
Yep.
that's my thesis.
State of the Union. What were your thoughts? I actually have to say I'm so happy that I didn't watch it, because I saw clips on social media, and then people hit me up with different clips on text, and I think that that's a much better use of my time than me having to watch it.
Well, listen. I mean, first of all, it was a clown
I
show.
saw that there's a huge approval. CNN poll, huge approval, 67% or something
Yeah,
thought that it was good. And CNN is not necessarily like pro-Trump, so
yeah, but the people who watch the State of the Union typically favor the president. So there's a skew in the people who
okay.
they view. But look, I like a lot of Trump's policies. Maybe that's not a secret. He was extremely divisive, and that's what he does. But and there was a moment. I'll say the negative things about Trump first, just so we are equal opportunity offenders here. There was a period of time when he came after tariffs, and he came after the Supreme Court. And I really didn't like that. That's definitely authoritarian vibes when he was like, "The Supreme Court was a bad ruling." Da, 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 da. He comes after them, and that's like, listen, respect the law of the land, respect that we have a court, and you can disagree with him all you want. I'm all for him coming after federal judges that are clearly activist judges, but the only way his agenda and his policies have credibility is if he then adheres to, let's say, then you say the Supreme Court, for better or for worse, is the Supreme Court of the land. And actually, if you look at the Supreme Court decision on tariffs, it wasn't like, "Hey, tariffs are bad." It was the way the legal argument he was using for the tariffs sets
Yeah.
a bad precedent for the future, and
Yeah.
I'm all for that. Like, we should not give any one president power. So I really didn't like the way he came out to the Supreme Court. I thought it was a lot of the times he went off in the middle of the thing about how he did this and he did that, and it was cringe. It was just very, very, like, it didn't need to be done. You saw Republicans; they zoomed the audience. The Republicans were like, "What the?" I think his kids were like, "What the hell is he doing?" But it's Trump. Um, on the other side, he did some genius moves politically. Like he said, and and they're real. I think kind of the masks are coming off, and I think there's just exasperation with the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party keeps on doubling down on these left woke policies. And even if you say, okay, look, I don't like ICE because of the way they're treating people, and it's inhumane. And I can absolutely buy the argument that what they're doing, the way they're deporting people, is inhumane. It's ugly. It's ugly. You can still have the guts. And there are a bunch of reports. They were looking around at each other, trying to figure out whether they should stand or not. He's like, stand up if you believe that the role of the U.S. government is to protect the citizens over illegal aliens. All the Republicans stand up, and Democrats don't. How? They're going to play this in the elections, and this is right after him saying that the only people who are stand between Americans and open borders is him and the Republicans. And then he goes, stand up if you believe you should protect U.S. citizens. How do you not stand for that? How do you, and it's not like they were consistent. So there was, an opinion. Maybe they're going to sit for all the things he says. No, but they stood for when he said, "Hey, no insider trading in Congress," and then Nancy Pelosi stood up, and so did Elizabeth Warren or whatever, and so did everyone else. And even though they're looking like shit, we're screwed. But
Well,
all
and
of
he said, I can't believe it. Nancy Pelosi
yeah,
is standing up.
yeah, yeah.
That was so good.
I
I
know
saw
that
that
was
clip.
exactly, and but it's true because like Ilhan Omar came with $1,000 net worth in 2 years or 3 years in Congress. She's worth 30 million. She became a great trader overnight. Her and her husband, that's actually her
No,
brother.
she's not a trader. She's looking after kids. She's running
Exactly,
daycares. Come on.
exactly, exactly. And then so first of all, he called her out. He called the Somali pirates, which is, and then and then he said that JD Vance is going to personally lead the Minnesota fraud investigation. That she's absolutely guilty. I mean, like this fraud happens in many. This fraud has been happening for decades. There are people in Chicago that I don't know them personally, but I know of in various communities that do this with medical devices. I've known this because my grandparents were kind of, they're given a walker, and then a few months later they're sent another walker, and they're like, "Well, we have this walker. Like the government pays for it. If you don't want it, don't worry, we'll just take it back." And then they have been, there's ways of charging Medicare for this, or they charge Medicare, and these grandparents don't understand anything, don't speak English, just sign off on things. This happens. Fraud is massive and rampant. In this case, it's Somali. Okay, there's cases of other places. She's absolutely guilty. I mean, we don't know this for a fact, obviously, right? But it just looks like she's absolutely guilty. And so, but she looked scared. You could see the faces. She looked actually really worried and scared and I think she should be. I think going from 1,000 to 30 million in 2 or 3 years is an extraordinary feat while you're also working full time in Congress. Um, but I thought he had these moments where it was that moment, and then there was a moment when he's like, "Hey, can we all agree, regardless of where you stand, that we should not transition children without the parental approval?" And none of the Democrats stood and clapped for that. And it's like even the serious trans activists, these that I follow, serious trans activists for trans rights, for everything, come out and say no, children shouldn't be transitioned in the first place, let alone without their parents' consent. I think it's a common sense thing to say, even if you're pro trans rights, to say don't transition children without talking to the parents. And
Alex, how can you be such a Nazi? I
exactly,
can't believe that I'm having a podcast with an actual Nazi.
exactly, a racist, a sexist, misogynist, narcissistic Nazi. So, but I've been actually called these things, and especially in the DC area, I've been called these things, and it kills me that the common sense things that are just like Americans over not immigrants, like not even immigrants, illegal aliens. I'm an immigrant. You're an immigrant. We're for immigration. We're totally for immigrants. But Americans over illegal immigrants in the U.S. How could you not say you're okay for that? How could you not say you're okay? How could you not for not transitioning children? How could you not stand when all these are for show, obviously, but you got to play the game. When he brought in the mother of Irina Zaretska, I forgot her last name, but she was stabbed in the train by an illegal immigrant, the crazy black dude that stabbed her from behind. How do you not stand for that? How do you not stand for I think some of the Medal of Honor recipients they stood for, but and I remember they stood for everything. It's like, come on, Democrats. These are 80-20 rules. Voter ID is an 80-20 rule with Democrats. He cited it. He said 89%. That's skewed. We're seeing in our data kind of more or less 80-20. But That's an 80-20 rule. Even Democrats want voter IDs. Like, what are
I
you
just
guys
have
doing?
I have a solution to this voter problem. Very, very simple solution.
Only Shimon
Every,
votes.
no, every person who votes is also served a beer by law. And
I
then
love
that's
it.
it. You need to check ID. Oh no, it's a beer if you're over 21, and it's like one of these
A
like
root beer.
energizing drinks with mushrooms inside that
Great
are
idea.
good for kids.
By the way,
But you have to check ID because otherwise you can serve a beer to a minor. So that's it.
by the way, by the way, I love it. I love your idea, and I know all the tongue in cheek that you for beer, obviously, the IDs. There was a great post I saw online. But so New York had a gigantic snowstorm, and Mandami obviously charges, $29 or whatever an hour, but you have to two
Pays.
pays
Pays.
pays to for volunteer snow shovelers. First of all, if you're volunteer, you're getting paid. You're not a volunteer, but whatever. You have two forms of ID plus your birth certificate or social security card to know that it's you. And then, but it wasn't even monitored. So people came, got shovels, went home, hung out, came back. But like we worked for 10 hours, and they just got paid. And this guy was like filming himself doing this. Now it's fraud. I mean, he's filming himself committing fraud, which is stupid. But the fact, just this idiocy, and obviously nothing got done. But this idiocy of these moron communists, I just hope it just shows what it does. And on top of this, while they're coming outside, last thing about the State of the Union, did you see the ad of him and AOC? And they're like,
No,
hey,
absolutely not.
free daycare in New York. It's all in Spanish.
Oh, yes, 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 yes.
It's like free daycare for anybody, blah, blah, blah. And at the end, we don't check your immigration papers. They literally say this. So it's like free daycare for illegals. And he's running up a budget. Like he's borrowing from emergency funds of the New York City. The buses aren't running. Buses got canceled randomly during the snowstorm. People got stranded at work and they have to like walk home for 4 hours. But the buses won't work. But we're gonna give free daycare to illegal immigrants. It's just so. It's just, and now people argue it's not just illegals, it's everyone, and they're not going to check immigration status. But the fact is that you're spending any $1 of the city's emergency fund closing down buses, but that doesn't, it goes to illegal immigrants as child, daycare services. That's just like, it's crazy, you
Yeah,
know?
no, I mean, look, I think it's great that it's happening much faster than I thought because, like, this is like the playbook of every socialist, every socialist regime. Because, like, what's the next thing that will happen? People will move into New York City because of the free daycare. Like, just think about it, free day. Like, first of all, like, my wife and I used to joke about this when we were living in California, and we got laid off, and it's like, okay, you still have to pay for health insurance, right? They have this thing called Medi-Cal that basically you still have to pay for health insurance. Now it's reduced, like you can get a reduced
Yeah.
rate if you don't work, but you still have to pay. Versus if you're an illegal immigrant, right? You get free healthcare without paying. So my wife and I were like, why don't we just say that we're illegal immigrants? Like we can literally say, hola, yo soy Shimon.
Yeah.
¿Dónde está mi healthcare gratis? No, seriously, it's just ridiculous. And so it's very clear that it's not going to work. It's like so clear that it's not going to work. Because like, just think about it, free childcare. Like, what will be the conditions of the child care? Like, who will be like, how are they going to watch over the kids if they don't have enough teachers? And if they do have enough teachers, then it's like, who's going to pay these? Like, no, I really don't understand. Like, seriously, this is something that will be very interesting to watch. And especially since, my friends moved from New York, they moved to Hoboken. It's literally like 10 minutes across the bridge, and you
Yeah.
still see the skyline of New York, and it's a completely different legal structure. So it's like, I just don't understand how they can. I mean, maybe, I don't know, like LA can do it because there's no place where you can go from LA, but like New York, just like, in California, there's many people that move to the Nevada side of Lake Tahoe, and then suddenly, they it's an amazing weather, amazing everything, but you don't have to pay the California taxes, and it's literally like 5 minutes to get to California. So I don't know. It's going to be very interesting, but I'm very happy that it's happening quickly because he could have like kind of slow played it, but he's going all in. I think that's the beauty about. So I'm a history buff, and I was like looking at these. There's this podcast that basically does alternative history, and it's these professors, history professors, and they're like, Hitler was such an idiot. He could have won World War II if he was just not anti-Semitic and if he just didn't believe that like Germans are better than everybody else. Because, for example, the Ukrainians really wanted to like cooperate with him because they were like they hated the Soviets, and so but he like killed them instead of like working with them, and all the Jewish scientists that left, and it's like, okay, but that was kind of the point of Hitler being Hitler. It's not like he could have won if he was this great dude, but he's not. So it's the same. It's like people say like, oh, like socialism could have worked if only A, B, and C. It's like, no, it just doesn't work every single time. And so Mamdani really believes that these are good ideas, because if he didn't believe that these are good ideas, I think he should have done it much more slowly and kind of like put his tentacles of power in many more places before people can see that it really doesn't work. But apparently he really believes it. And guess what? It's easy to be a communist when you're rich. Like
Yes.
he's rich. He never had to work for his life in his life. So it's like he just thinks, yeah, like of course, like what. And the most beautiful thing is I see these interviews with people on the street, and they're like, what are you gonna do if billionaires leave? And you know what's the answer? We're
Oh,
gonna take
no.
their businesses. We're going to take their businesses. We're going to say you cannot leave with your business. And it's like, what is a business? Especially like in New York, it's not like they're manufacturing cars. It's like, what is a business? It's a bunch of people doing a bunch of work. So he's like, okay, I'm closing down my business and I'm opening a completely new business in Florida. And I'm just going to call my ex-employees and ask them if they want to be employees of my new business. Like, how stupid do you have to be to say, what will you do if the billionaires leave? We'll take their businesses. It just like requires a level of not understanding basic things. Like they think it's like, oh, we have like an oil well and we extract oil from the ground. And so, yeah, if you want to leave, we're going to take your oil well. But that's not the businesses that are paying the taxes in New York. Like, really, how stupid do you have to be? And then if they do leave, then like what's your plan? Because clearly you will
get
get
taxed
less
more.
revenue.
Yeah.
No, but you will get less revenue. You cannot tax more. The thing is, they don't understand that there's like a limit to how much you can
No,
tax
they will get
someone.
taxed more. They'll feel more effects, but the tax collected will fall because you're getting rid of all of the billionaires.
So that's what I'm saying. So it's like
It's a
if
spiral.
the revenue falls, right? This is what happened in Venezuela. Like they were rich and now they're poor. So it can be the same. Like, Detroit used to be a very wealthy city
Yeah.
in like World War II. And so like I could see a situation where like New York just like becomes Detroit and Miami becomes New York. Because guess what? Everything about Miami is better than New York,
Yeah.
apart from the network of people that are already there. Like the only reason that people want to live in New York and Wall Street and all of that and the fashion, and there's just like so many things that get decided in New York. But like they can start going to Miami. And by the way, this is how LA got started. Do you know why the movie business is in LA? I think we might have discussed this in a previous episode, but it's a true thing. So Thomas Edison had the monopoly on the movie, on the projector or something. Something about the light bulb, something. And so then they were like, we want to like make movies, but so Thomas Edison doesn't sue us because he was very litigious. We want to be literally at the other side of the country, so we get enough like heads up when his people come for us, right? And we can just move to Mexico really quickly. And that's why LA
Wow.
got started, and that's why all the movie businesses in LA, they literally wanted to be as far away from New Jersey. Edison was in New Jersey, I think. So like as far away from there as possible. So like what's the other line that goes as far as possible? It's literally Miami. It's like as far as you can down the
That's
coast.
so funny.
And so I can totally see Miami becoming like in 100 years, Miami could be the next New York.
Yeah.
And
Or
it's
quicker
like,
with AI.
or quicker. Yeah, with
Because
AI,
AI
that's a
is
really good point. Yeah. So the weather's better, like everything's better about Miami. It's a little bit far, but it's like it's fine. You can fly.
That's
I
right.
guess.
It's a little
But
bit far,
anyway,
but it's finding a lie.
this was great. I hope people, the listeners, let us know what you think about our disagreements. Are you expecting short-term pain? Do you think we can weather the storm without a crazy short-term pain? We would really love to hear from you. And yeah, anything else? Any other last thoughts?
I think it's it. I love these episodes.
Yes, it's been very
Until next
eventful
time.
recently, and it's good to connect every week and chat about things.
It
So
is.
thank you all. And now we'll do our new outro. Thank you, and have a wonderful week, everybody.